Hi gang, it's Hexy. Let's talk a little bit about exploitation. 5.3.0 in the latest G.O.S.S rulebook. There's like 4 unit modes that you use constantly. And then there's a 5th one called Combat Reserve. But you've got Tactical mode. You've got Prepared Assault mode. You've got Exploitation mode, and you've got Combat Reserve, and then you've got Maneuver Reserve mode. Okay, so the Combat Reserve, that's kind of the oddball one. That happens during, according to the rules, you can do that anytime during movement. I had to get Clay Stone to explain to me how the Combat Reserve function. It's not, you put units in Combat Reserve, and then they can affect, they're like support for attacks if you want to use them. So maybe we'll talk about that a little later on. But I want to talk about exploitation. So exploitation is you place your units in mode determination into exploitation mode. And what that does, it allows you to have units to, according to the rules, to react to offensive or defensive opportunities that are not within the normal movement phase. Exploitation has its own phase. You can have overruns during that phase. It's kind of a way to put your units available for a mobile attack, or just movement outside the regular movement phase. You can put units into exploit mode during a non-rest game turn, or the friendly mode determination phase, or during a friendly exploit phase if the unit is in maneuver reserve, which I'll go into that later. I'll talk about that later in another video. All right, the unit cannot be fatigue 1 or 2. They cannot be adjacent to an enemy unit to go into exploitation mode, okay? And they must be in general supply and in command, and they cannot be in a no fuel state. I'm not even going to talk about that stuff. I'm not even into supply and fuel and stuff yet. And it must be a mech class unit or a leg class unit motorized using truck points or allied inherent transport. Okay? So remember that. Mech class units or a leg unit using truck points, which can be on either side, or allied inherent transport. An example of that would be like the infantry unit, the mech infantry, or the German mech infantry, like Panzer Grenadiers, stuff like that have mechanized movement. And then you got the Brits have the troops that can use kangaroos. They're in kangaroos. All right. So you'll mark the units. Let's see if I got one here. I'm sure I got one somewhere. You'll mark the units with an exploit marker. So like if I was going to put it on that Panzer Grenadier unit right there, I'd drop that exploit marker on it, or on that tank. He's mechanized, to put that on there. All right. So you mark them with exploit. Matter of fact, we'll just drop that on there right now. And to establish that they're in the exploitation mode, okay? They may only move during a friendly exploit phase. All right? They cannot voluntarily move in any other phase. Notice the keyword there is voluntarily. So they may be involuntarily moved, I don't know, by a fire mission or something like that, okay, from the enemy. The units do not enter or exit exploit mode individually. They must do so as part of a formation. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky. And I had to have Clay explain this one to me too. So as part of a formation or part of a regiment. So what this rule is translating to me is, and if I get this wrong, somebody please comment and straighten me out. So these 2 units right here is what this sounds like to me. And believe me, I'm doing this as much for me as if this helps anybody else, because I need to learn this system. So that is the 60th Regiment from the 116th Panzer. So according to that statement, I can put this regiment into exploit mode. However, if I put one of them in, all of them from that regiment have to go into exploit mode. Okay? So keep that in mind. You can't just put one unit from the regiment in there. All right? Or the parent formation. So I could literally put, if I decided to put the 116th Panzer, the entire division, into exploit mode, then all the units in the 116th Panzer would have to go into exploit mode. So once again, it says units do not enter or exit exploit mode individually. They must do so as part of a formation, which is the division, or regiment, okay? To enter exploit mode, all mech class units subordinate to a formation or a regiment. This includes attached units must enter exploit mode. So if for a 116th Panzer, you put them in exploit mode, every unit in the 116th Panzer has to go into exploit mode. Or you choose a regiment, every unit of the regiment has to go into exploit mode, okay? And this is where this instruction comes to me from Clay, that you detach units, which in sense creates a battle group or like a camp group, for like the Germans used to do. And then they become like a separate sort of, let's say, division or formation on their own. The dilemma with that is now instead of having one division that you're having to account for supply and ammo and all that stuff for, now you've created another division that you have to account for using the same supply points. So like if it cost you, let's just say for because I haven't read supply yet, that it cost you 1 point of supply to make the entire 116th Panzer move, have fuel. Well, now you've split another formation off, so now you've created 2 formations. So now that supply would be 2 points. That's an example. That's not the rule. I haven't read the rule, but that's just to give you an idea of the fact that you will incur some sort of penalty for making this happen, okay? Mech class divisional asset units can enter exploit mode along with a regiment subordinate to the same formation. There's no limit to the number of divisional asset units that may enter exploit mode with one regiment. So, divisional asset, I don't even think I had one on here for the 116th Panzer. Well, yeah, I guess no, he's part of a regiment too. But sometimes like the Americans will get the M10 tank destroyers that are attached to a division, which I got one sitting right here. Let's see. Yeah, so the 28th has the 707th Sherman Battalion. All right, so like a divisional asset. So keep that in mind. They can go into exploit mode with a regiment. So I don't think you can. According to the way this rule reads, you can put a regiment into exploit mode, and any unit that's attached can go in with that regiment into exploit mode, okay? And there's no, like I said, there's no limit to the number of divisional asset units that may enter exploit mode with one regiment. So a division could have all units of one of its regiments enter exploit mode. However, it could not have part of that regiment enter exploit while other units of the same regiment do not. Got that? If one unit of a regiment, if one battalion or one company of a regiment goes into exploit mode, the entire regiment does. All right, recon units. I have one right here from the 116th Panzer. All right, these guys are unique. All right, Aufklaren. They can go into exploit mode on their own. All right, so individual mech class recon units of any size may enter exploit mode without having to place the whole formation or regiment into exploit mode. Once they're in, all other rules regarding exploit are in effect. The recon unit in exploit mode may not stack with units not in exploit mode at any time. At any time, all right? If at the end of any phase a recon unit is in a stack with a unit not in exploit mode, the owning player must immediately remove the exploit marker. So, in that example, if this recon unit, that tank unit's sitting there and this recon unit moves up, and at the end of the movement, he's in that hex with that unit that's not in exploit mode, you remove the exploit marker. And he's now back into his, tactical mode, I guess. All right. So, let's see. Recon unit may stack with any unit in exploit mode allowed by the special stacking. So what that is just saying is if this tank unit here, these Panthers, are in exploit mode, and he's in exploit mode, and he moves in there, that's fine. He can do that all day long. All right. Exiting exploit mode. The owning player may voluntarily remove exploit markers during mode determination phase, which is near the beginning of the turn. All right. The administration phase, if the unit is out of supply. All right. If the unit is out of supply, during the exploit phase, if the unit is adjacent to an enemy unit that is in PA mode. So if he's near, so if that unit is in exploitation mode and he's near a unit, he's adjacent to a unit that is in prepared assault. I should have a different color, shouldn't I? Let me find one. I don't want to confuse anybody. All right. So that German unit is in exploit mode, and he finds himself adjacent to a unit in prepared assault mode, then this comes off. Okay. So keep that in mind. If the unit retreats due to the result of a fire mission, or if the unit conducts an unsuccessful overrun. So there are 3 cases where during the exploit phase, all right, that marker can be removed. So again, during the exploit phase, if he's adjacent to an enemy unit that's in PA mode, okay, and this is a must. This isn't, you don't have an option. You have to do this, all right. If the unit retreats due to a result of a fire mission, okay, fire support mission, or if the unit conducts an unsuccessful overrun. We'll get to all that overrun stuff later on, all right. The combat phase, if he is forced to involuntarily remove its exploit marker. All right, so during combat, he can be forced to remove his exploitation marker. So let's get him back on here. All right. Okay. And then we want to talk about re-entering. If you want to read that one yourself. All right, so each side has 2 exploitation phases in each game turn. Units in exploit mode may move in the following order. Units using mech road movement. And then B is units using non-road movement, okay? During an AM and PM game turn, units in exploit mode may move up to 1/2, round up, their modified movement allowance in both friendly exploit phases. All right, so during AM and PM game turns, units in exploit mode may move up to 1/2, round up, their modified movement allowance in both friendly and exploit phases. So this guy right here, he's got a movement factor of 12. All right, he can move 1/2 of that, so he's going to move 6, okay? Modified, I haven't got into what modified movement allowance is yet. Maybe that's got to do with mud and stuff like that. During a night game turn, or an ENA, I'm not sure what I don't remember what it stands for. It's extended something, night action or something, I don't know. Each side may use only one of its 2 friendly exploit phases. So units moving in that one exploit phase may move up to their full modified movement allowance. So we'll take a night turn, for example. You get 2 exploitation phases. It says here that the owning player has to determine which exploitation phase they're going to use. I haven't looked through the sequence of play completely to tell you where those 2 fall, but you got to pick one, and that's when you do your movement. And the units that are in exploitation mode can move their full allowance, their full movement allowance. All right, enemy units. Units in exploit mode do not pay additional movement points to move adjacent to enemy units if the hex entered contains movement concealment terrain or movement covering terrain, which would be like the woods. All right. So if that unit, that enemy unit is sitting there and he moves in here through movement concealed terrain or movement covering terrain, it doesn't cost him any additional movement points, all right, to move adjacent. A unit in exploitation mode that begins an exploitation phase adjacent to an enemy unit in PA mode must retreat. So if the exploitation phase starts and that unit is sitting here at the start of the phase adjacent to him, he's got to retreat away, okay? All right, pretty simple so far, all right? The presence of an adjacent enemy unit with a tactical assault marker does not force the unit to leave exploitation mode. So if that American unit doesn't have prepared assault, he's got a tactical assault, this does not cause him to remove his exploitation. All right. The unit in exploit mode may retreat up to the maximum retreated distance allowed by, well, I don't know what that is yet, I haven't got there yet. After completion of this retreat, the unit reverts to tactical mode, remove the exploitation marker. So, okay, so when he moves away from this guy in prepared assault, whatever the distance is he retreats, once he retreats, the exploitation marker comes off and he goes back into tactical mode, all right? Tactical mode is your unmarked mode. the enemy player may advance the units in PA mode 1 hex. So he retreated away, lost his exploitation. Now he can advance 1 hex. All right. After completing advance, the owning player removes the PA marker. So it's like he conducted an attack without actually fighting. So if he decides to advance, he removes that PA marker, and he's back in tactical mode, okay? And he replaces the PA marker, so he removes that, and he replaces it with a tactical assault marker. All right, so let's run through that again. This unit is sitting right here. He's in prepared, and this tank is sitting right here. The exploitation phase starts for the Germans. He has to retreat. He's in exploitation mode. He's in prepared assault. Means he has to retreat. He retreats away, whatever the distance is. This guy here can now advance 1 hex. He removes his prepared assault. He goes to tactical assault, and this guy loses his exploitation marker. Simple enough? Hope so. If the advancing unit... Okay, I want to back that up. So you replace the PA marker with a TA marker if the unit is adjacent to an enemy unit. All right, let's start that one over. See, I'm learning too. So let's go back to this environment here. He's in prepared assault. All right. And he's up in here. And we'll say he's right here. Okay. This guy started in exploitation mode. He started with a prepared assault. All right. So, the exploitation starts. He moves away. Blah, blah, blah. He loses his exploitation marker, okay? The owning player, or the enemy player who's in prepared assault, he can advance 1 hex. So he advances. Now he's adjacent to another enemy unit. If he wishes to conduct a tactical assault, once he removes this, he can replace it with a tactical assault marker. All right. So to read the rule, he replaces the PA marker with a TA marker if the unit is adjacent to an enemy unit and the owning player wishes to conduct a tactical assault, or if the advancing unit is not adjacent to an enemy unit or the owning player does not wish to conduct a tactical assault, he just simply removes the PA marker. Okay, so his options were, from this, he advances. He has 2 options. If he wants to tactical assault this guy, he can take the prepared assault marker off, replace it with a tactical assault marker, because he wants to attack him. If he does not wish to attack, and he moves in there and he doesn't wish to attack, you just remove the prepared assault marker. Simple enough. So you can either keep it or get rid of it. All right. And if there's nobody there when you advance, you just simply get rid of it. All right. Exploit and overrun. All right. So overruns combine exploit movement and combat, allowing units in exploit mode to displace or destroy enemy forces while on the move. All right. And that's what we talked about at the beginning. You're moving and attacking while on the move. Those of you that play OCS, you know what that is. Those of you that played EFS, you know what that is. All right, so only mech class units, not leg class units transported by truck points or allied inherent transport, may conduct an overrun. Okay, so you can exploit move leg class units that are using truck points or they have inherent mobile, okay? But you can't overrun with those units. The only exception to that rule are the units transported by kangaroos, which I think that's only the Allies have that, the Brits. All right, so only 1 unit at a time can conduct an overrun. All right, therefore, the player may not conduct an overrun using a stack of units. All right, so if this entire shebang right here, let's say if they were in exploit mode, all right, that whole thing, since you can only move 1 unit at a time, you can't move the stack, all right? You can only overrun with 1 unit at a time. So both of these would not be able to overrun together. It'd have to be just 1 at a time, all right? That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, okay? Treat all units stacked using special stacking as 1 unit for this rule. Okay, I have not read the special stacking, so apparently there is a case, which I would imagine, since That's a recon unit. I'm going to bet you that those two can go together. All right. I'll go to that one later on too. But the basic rule is only one unit can conduct an overrun at a time. All right. The following units cannot conduct an overrun: out of supply, out of communication, fatigued units level 1 or 2, or units in a hex without movement, covering terrain, movement, concealed terrain, whatever, which is the last hex prior to entering the overrun hex, if that hex is adjacent to more than one enemy unit. So, if these two guys are sitting here, and let's put them here. We'll put them in the woods, all right? And this recon unit is moving up in here and exploit. He wants to overrun that guy there. He cannot do it because he's in open terrain. It's not concealed terrain or covering terrain. And there are two units adjacent to him, okay? If these two guys were here and he moves up and through these woods into this hex, he could do his overrun to either hex because he is in movement, covering, or movement concealment terrain. You know what? Let's just look up that right now. What is MCT? I know what it means. It means you're kind of hidden by the features. MCT, where are you? And naturally, they don't have it. Yeah, I don't have it in here. Anyhow, it's terrain that sort of conceals your movement. Movement concealing terrain, MCT. Movement covering terrain, whatever, like woods, stuff like that. Okay, woods, forests, things like that. So once again, if he wanted to overrun either one of those units, if he was coming through those woods, which is MCT, he could do his overrun. All right, no matter how many units there. But if they're in these woods and he wants to overrun and he moves into this terrain hex because it's clear, it's not concealment terrain, all right, he can't overrun because there are two units adjacent to that hex he's starting his overrun from. And it's always the hex where you're going to conduct your overrun from. All right, so let's see what else we got here. During night game turns, you treat all OCT as MCT. I don't know what the heck OCT is. Another one I got to look up. This game makes me feel like I'm back in the military with all the acronyms. So, and I'll bet you OCT is not in this list either. Nope. So I'll have to look that one up later too. All right. I'm sure it has something to do with being open or something like that. All right. The unit conducting the overrun must be able to enter the overrun hex. All right. So he's got to be able to enter the hex he's going to overrun to. So let's just say this guy's just sitting there by himself in the clear. All right. And he moves into this clear hex here and he wants to overrun him. He's the only unit there, so we're good. All right. So he's got to be able to enter that hex. All right. Which he can. All right. Because it's clear. All right. He may begin its exploit movement by declaring and conducting an overrun against an adjacent unit, or may move and when entering a hex adjacent to an enemy unit, immediately declare the overrun against the adjacent unit. So he can start right there and overrun, or he can move up and then overrun. All right? And I'm sure there's movement points. It costs one additional movement point to conduct the overrun. This is in addition to the movement point cost of entering the overrun hex. All right? So if this guy's got a movement of 14 and he gets half, so he's going to get 7. So he's going to go 1 to there, all right? And that's clear terrain, so that's 1. So it's going to be 2, and then to do the overrun, you add another one, that would be 3. So one additional movement point to conduct the overrun, which is in addition to the movement point cost of entering the overrun hex. And you also got to account for like if there's like any hex side stuff that might cause you to expend more movement points, all right? Expends all that's what this next rule is. He expends all normal hex and hex side terrain costs to enter the hex being overrun, including the cost of moving adjacent to an enemy unit. Oh, so there's a cost for moving into the zone of control or moving adjacent to an enemy unit. I don't have that right in front of me to tell you. All right, so this only applies if the overrun hex is not MCT. And there are adjacent units friendly to the units being overrun. Okay, right, fair enough. All right, it may conduct an overrun regardless of whether it is moving via mech road movement or non-road movement. Okay, so if he's just off in the clear, he can do it. Or if he's using the road, he can do it. Okay, that's nice, because a lot of games you can't be using the road at all. All right, a hex may be the subject of an overrun more than once per exploitation phase. All right, so a lot of games have a rule that once a hex had an overrun attempted against it, the hex couldn't happen again. But in this game here, you can do it as many times as you want. All right. A unit or stack of units may be subject to overrun more than once per exploitation phase. So some games you have where if the unit's been overrun and he has to retreat, well, guess what? He can still be overrun again. There's no limit to that. A unit may overrun more than one hex in the same exploit phase, but the same unit cannot overrun the same units in the same hex more than once. All right? So if he overruns this unit here, but that unit, maybe it's not successful and he backs off and he still has movement points, he cannot overrun that same unit in that same hex that he just tried to overrun. But if this unit were pushed away and he still had enough movement points to overrun, he could overrun him again because he's now in a different hex. And it's the same unit. All right, ground support missions with exploitation movement. Units executing exploit movement may be the subject to a maximum of one ground support attack in each hex entered if the hex entered is within 6 hexes of an enemy unit and does not contain movement covering terrain and is observable by a friendly ground unit or air observation. I haven't gotten into air observation yet. And I haven't gotten into what the line of sight or what the ground unit observation is. But let's say this guy let's say he started here in this little village. And once he moved into here, he became in, I'll look up the rules for that later, but he could see him. So now he's in clear hex. He's not in movement covering terrain. They could fire a fire mission at him with artillery. All right. And then he moves into the next hex. Still in this open terrain here. It's not covered. The guy could be fired on again. And then the guy moved here, he could be fired on again. Okay. Now, if something happens to him, obviously it's going to stop that exploit movement. So, and this says exploit movement. It doesn't say anything about conducting an overrun. It just says units executing exploit movement are subject. But they can only receive one ground support mission against them in each hex. That could be pretty rough, man, if you could call a fire support mission on this guy in 3 different hexes as he's approaching. All right, an opposing player may conduct only one ground support mission in each eligible hex the exploit unit enters. So a player may only conduct a maximum of one ground support mission in each hex against a single unit. All right, conduct ground support missions using the standard procedures. All right, if the exploiting unit retreats due to a result of a ground support mission, the owning player must immediately remove the unit's exploit marker. So if this guy's chugging along an exploit down this road and a fire mission gets hit on him and he's forced to retreat, that comes off. All right, fire mission on him forces him to retreat, the exploit marker gets removed. All right, simple enough. Overrun Combat. Well, we'll go through the basics of it. So, all right. So players resolve overruns using the normal fire support mission and ground assault procedures, except as modified below. I'm not going to get into how you do ground assault and fireman. That's part of combat and bombard or fire support stuff. The target hex for any defending fire support mission is the last hex entered prior to entering the hex containing the units being overrun. All right, so now you're getting fire support in the last hex, okay, right before the unit overruns. Joy. But that's a lot to remember. I mean, that guy could literally get pelted multiple times on his way to the overrun. The overrunning player may not conduct offensive fire support missions. So as he's rolling up to the target, he can't call fire on that, which I remember my days in the military as a scout. sitting in my commander's hatch of my APC. If I needed to call fire from our mortar platoon or from some artillery, just because my vehicle was moving didn't mean I couldn't call it. But you can't do it in this game. The defending player may conduct a medium capacity artillery fire support mission against the overrunning units if the units being overrun are in an entrenchment, a fort, or fortified area. All right, I won't go into that one yet, but it's just, it gives you a stronger fire support mission is what it gives you. And I'm sure we'll cover that later. If the overrun unit does not meet the above requirements, but it is a battalion, the defending player may conduct a light capacity artillery fire support mission. Right, something else I have to get into later when we get more depth with fire support missions, because I know there's multiple versions of it. All right, in a ground assault for overrun combat, when you actually do the overrun, there's neither side can use combat reserves, which I mentioned those earlier, what those are. Those can only be used for just your regular ground assaults. After determining the ground assault result, but before resolving those results, the player must determine if the overrun was successful or unsuccessful by following the below steps. I know there's interesting. So you've done your odds, you've rolled your dice, and you see the results. And you already know what they are. That's the way that sounds to me. After determining the ground assault result, but before resolving those results, players must determine if the overrun was successful or unsuccessful by following the below steps. The attacking player must declare if he will convert, okay, I get it, all discretionary hits to step losses. If he chooses not to do that, the overrun is successful. Okay? If he chooses not to convert all discretionary hits, the overrun is unsuccessful. So if he does not take the discretionary hits and make them actual hits, then the overrun is considered unsuccessful. If he does convert all of the discretionary hits into step losses, the players compare the attacker's total hits, mandatory and discretionary, to the defender's total hits. If the attacker's total is less than the defender's, the overrun is successful. All right, so let's say he did his overrun and he got one step loss and he got 2 discretionaries. And this guy got 2 step losses. So he converts the 2 discretionaries. I don't even think that's possible. But he converted the 2 discretionaries, so he's got a total of 3 step losses, and he only suffered 2. This would be not successful because he took more hits than this guy did. So let's just say this guy only took 1 discretionary hit, and he took 2 step losses. He converts that to 1 step loss, so he's only and then they have procedures for what you do if it's successful or unsuccessful. So that's pretty much the basis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through a couple times myself just to make sure I understand. And that's just one of the 4 modes, 5 modes we'll say, that these units can be in. And it's got a lot of checks and balances. They really, really, really put work into this game to try to get some serious accuracy of what may happen or what happens to a unit when such and such happens to it. So they do have the last little point in exploitation. It's called exploitation and ground assault. Units that are in exploit mode may conduct a tactical assault during friendly combat phase. So he can do all that movement, exploitation, and overrun, and he's in exploit mode. He can still do tactical assaults. All right. You mark the units in exploit mode with a tactical assault marker during the attack designation segment, but the exploitation marker stays in place. So he could have that, and he could have a tactical assault marker on him to do regular combat. All right. Resolve all fire support missions and the tactical assault using your standard procedures. Units in exploit mode must remove the exploit marker if forced to involuntarily remove the tactical assault marker. So if he gets forced by combat to remove that or a fire mission, then this comes off too. Defending units in exploit mode receive 1 column shift to the right. All right, so if he's in exploit mode and this guy is attacking him, he's going to get a column shift to the right. All right, the defending unit. 1 column shift to the right. And that's it. That's exploit mode. Exploit mode covered, let's see. Let's just say it covered about 2 pages completely. All right. 2 pages completely, 6 columns worth of stuff, and multiple segments. I trust me that the other modes they're not as long. The sections are not as long. So this is my first attempt. Like I say, I am learning the rules to G.O.S.S. Anything that I did not point out or that I may have misinterpreted, if you guys read this, Clay, I know that if you see it, you'll give me a comment. If I'm misunderstanding a rule, please put it in the comments so that I know what I'm doing and I can correct what I'm doing that's wrong, because I wanted to get it right before I start playing this. But we all know how that works. You're always going to get something wrong. So, but if it's something that could have a serious effect on that action, oh God, please let me know in the comments. All right, guys, this is Hexy, and we are learning G.O.S.S. And that was Exploitation from Decision Games, and we're using Hurtgen and Hell's Forest. All right, talk to y'all soon.